Thank you for tuning into our podcast, the second in the series. And today we'll be looking at how to understand the record level of UK solar farm capacity that has been approved in planning in 2022. Joining us is Finlay Colville, our head of market research for PV Tech and solar media. And straight away, I'll get into the questions. Finlay, thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you, Jason.
Great stuff. So could you tell us about the solar farm proposals which have attracted significant mainstream press? What's prompted this?
Well, I think it's a combination of several factors that have all come together this year. Certainly, over the last 18 months, there's been a lot of coverage on solar farms new solar farms being proposed within the UK. And in particular, I think it's more specific to certain parts of England and more recently within Wales. So 2022 and the last few months is certainly not a new concept of there being mainstream press and media coverage, but I was thinking about what's driven this recent interest, if you like, of some of the newspapers and so on, and it's several things have come together. So you've obviously got this broad issue of energy security is now being spoken about because it's a concern. The UK, like many other countries around the world, countries across mainland Europe, you can see what's happening in Germany at the moment with gas. Energy security, everyone knew was something that would be great to have. But the way the whole market works and the fact that it wasn't a problem in the past meant that nobody was doing any action towards it. So I think that now what's happened with Ukraine in the last 6 months, the whole issue of energy security is topical. So within that, obviously, is what are you doing as a country in order to reduce dependency on overseas energy, whatever it is that's coming in. So solar farms is part of that. And then when there's solar being proposed in fields, then you're going to get conflicting opinions. And it's just that the stakes, I guess, have got a little bit higher. I think also the UK, again, like many countries around the world, is in this kind of high post COP26, and the whole climate change thing again. The last few months with record temperatures, record flooding at the moment, parts of the world. Again, it just brings the whole energy production, energy security, what you're doing against climate change, what you're doing domestically, onto everybody's radar. The other thing that's been happening a lot this year that's prompted a lot of attention is that you've got big investment vehicles, if you like, and I'll come on a little bit later to say what they are, but there's a lot of institutional money coming into the UK and around Europe looking to invest and looking to do it with a sustainable and ESG driver, and that just brings more money into looking at new greenfield sites and potential solar farms on them. So I think all those things together have just put the proposals, the planning applications, much more visible, and therefore you're going to have people with different opinions, and you're going to have people looking at those planning applications and looking at potential solar farms on them as a positive thing and as a negative thing. So I think really that's in the last few months what's kind of been behind all this kind of noise, if you like.
Okay, so has there been a new surge? Is there, is it a heightened number of applications in 2022, and how would this compare to the last 13 years when solar farms have been proposed as a solution for our renewable energy targets?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I guess if you just kind of landed on the planet at the start of 2022, you'd see, wow, look at all these new solar farms being planned in the UK, and there's a perception, this is a kind of new concept or in the last couple of years, or that large scale developments are new. But I kind of split the UK's involvement in solar farms into three phases. You've got the kind of period between 2010 and 2016, where an awful lot of solar farms were being proposed, starting off with 5 megawatts, all production incentive driven through feed-in tariffs, through ROPs. And that lasted, so that 5-6 year period until 2016, so an awful lot of applications going in. During that period, there was quite some level of discomfort, of course, when people saw this as being a threat, or just quite frankly didn't like the idea of any change to the fields around their villages, and it's completely understandable. And then between 2017 and about 2020, there was a little bit of a quiet period, so you hardly heard anything about new solar farms being proposed, and that is because the incentives had gone, and then largely the world was changing for a whole bunch of reasons. And then when there was this new focus and new investment came in looking at new developments in solar, driven by a whole range of factors, one of which, of course, is that UK's renewable energy target. That per se doesn't drive investment. That just sets a nice kind of number for everyone to aspire to. So I don't think there's been a new surge. It's just that what's happened in the last couple of years is slightly different to what happened in that initial 5-6 year rush under incentives back in 2010, 2016. Right now, you've got probably more capacity, not number of applications, but more capacity per application being proposed. So by default, that means that the sites being identified are larger, and also it's a to some extent a post-subsidy world that can and likes to be driven by larger developments beyond previous levels that were set by National Grid limits to 50 megawatts DC as it was a few years ago. So now you've got sites going into the NSIP program, and also Scottish Government, Welsh Government, that can have effectively no limits as long as there's grid capacity available. So that's the different dynamic that's crept in. So there's one bit that's a new surge. It's the mega sized projects that are essentially looking to tap into national infrastructure requirements, so like essential infrastructure planning designation, and that's brand new for solar. And I guess that it's more an indication that solar is a part of that whole energy mix is much more being seen as much more important from a government and the utility standpoint.
And so you talk about the sites being larger, and then obviously inevitably the land size being used is larger. Now we've got a new Prime Minister coming in next week, and it's between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, but it does look to be weighed in Liz Truss's favour. And the rhetoric coming from these two, both of them, on land use and how solar farms proposals, could change the relationship between food production and energy production, is widely being reported on. Is this something the sector needs to worry about? Should the public be worried about this?
Well, actually, I remember the first time I came across Liz Truss was when she was one of the most vocal MPs against any solar being deployed back in 2011, 2012. So she has a long track record of, just frankly not liking. I mean, I don't know how else to phrase it. Not being in favor or not wanting to be seen to be supporting. And of course, right now you've got the two candidates that I think are largely saying what they think needs to be said in order to get the votes from the people that need to vote. So whether or not that is actually what they think, That's a different question. Certainly with Sunak, I'm not sure if there's anything really, on record to think that this is something that's fundamental to his, psyche. But should the sector be worried, because there's a quite a bit of like what I call collateral damage from the coverage on what they're saying. In some ways I think no, and then in some ways I think that there are definitely issues that it's raised. On the one side, that what they're saying is completely misaligned to the current government and UK energy strategy. Allocation of CFDs, the whole modus operandi of utility companies right now running the UK and having huge and prioritized investments for solar is a key part of the energy mix. It's completely out of alignment with National Grid, DNOs. Literally, you can keep going through all the different categories that are actually responsible for the UK's energy mix and its footprint. So it's misaligned to everything that's currently been put in place, and is seeing all this additional investment and support from the government through a whole range of things, CFDs, NSIPs, and so on. So it's that's in some ways, then you say it has no weighting. It is absolutely just, just hot air within a knee-jerk, campaign of trying to get a few votes quickly, and then it just evaporates. But it's feeding into this whole public perception that this is not, that solar farms being planned in large areas is not a good thing. If we want to be, black and white about the whole thing, it's something that's always been, been an issue whenever solar's been proposed for a field. Probably no dissimilar to when wind is proposed, or if it's a new housing development or it's a retail park. It's something that's going in that people are think is going to be a threat for some reason. They'd rather have fields and cows and trees and so on than anything else. But what it has done is, and certainly in the context of NSIPs and post-subsidy greater than 50 megawatt sites, it's just highlighted, I think, that there's just this massive need for dialogue and discussion and education, the pros and cons of solar. It's not the solution everywhere all the time. There will be areas that are being proposed that it probably isn't the right thing that should be done there. And then you've got the whole, in the past few months, this focus on food and, the cost of living crisis and food prices. So it's become kind of mixed up in that. And I think it kind of needs everyone to just stand back and break it out and kind of do a bit more education rather than this real simplistic thing. These solar farms are bad, we should not have them, which is what we're getting. That I don't think helps anyone. And it's a bit, but you've got these views right now that seem to be polar opposites. You're either for them or you're against them. Whereas somewhere there's a kind of sensible approach. And I think that's what the solar industry has to be absolutely proactive in doing that, and not doing it in a way that sells solar as being the solution for everything, everyone, everywhere, but looking at it from a much more pragmatic standpoint.
And also in the press recently, in the last few days, last week, we've seen some reporting that suggests that solar farms are being refused planning applications. Is this correct? Or is there another side to that story?
So potentially the worst piece of market research I've seen in my life was propagated and picked up by some mainstream press outlets. If ever you want to put a theory together about spin doctors diving into some research entity and telling them to pull numbers to show an industry in a negative light, absolute blinder of success in terms of doing that. So there have been some sites, solar farms refused this year. There's always sites refused. I think this article said there's been 23 sites refused so far in 2022. 2021 and 22, right? So like 20 months. This is way more than was refused in the period between 2017 and 2020. So there's 23 sites refused. What the article didn't say there was that 212 were approved. And what the article didn't say is that actually almost no solar farms were decided on in 2017 to 2019. So actually, if there's normally if there's like 10 solar farms that are being adjudicated on from a planning perspective, 7 will get through. 3 probably will get rejected at any time. This has always been the case. Of those 3, 1 or 2 will probably even get through an appeal. So actually, it's if you look at it's a little bit like saying, my exam results aren't good this year. I get twice as many questions wrong in my exam. I went from 99% to 98%. It's a little bit like focusing on the 1 or 2 you got wrong and not the 98 and 99 that you got right. So I think that it's really disappointing that that side's being used as opposed to looking at the whole picture and in terms of numbers. And actually, when you come down to the numbers, it's record levels actually so far this year. There was back in 2014 and 2015, there was about 3.5 gigawatts per year that was approved, and there was probably about 20% of that was refused application. A number of that just dropped. Some of it went to appeal, some of it just dropped, didn't go to appeal because the subsidies ran out. So far, since the start of 2021, there's over 7 gigawatts has been approved. And a lot of that is on the back of government supported key energy requirement needs through CFDs and NSIPs. So the reality is a completely different story. And somehow along the lines, you get this, if you've got 2 camps, black and white, then you're going to get people that are going to jump on negatives and make a story out of it. So that's really for anyone that did kind of pick up on that over the last 7 days. It was just an absolute shocking use of numbers in completely misleading manner.
Well, you've spoken and written extensively about the sea change in attitude globally when it comes to solar as a key element of net zero targets worldwide. And how can we understand this when looking at solar deployment targets and investments here in the UK today?
Yeah, I think that, I touched on a few of those in answering the other questions. It is all about, if you look at where the investment's coming from and, where the kind of final planning adjudication is coming from, it's serious stuff here. We're no longer looking at, 1 or 2 people diving into a sector and wanting to make a quick buck. The investments we're looking at, big players, key utilities, key IPPs, major global corporates who essentially have got net zero targets to hit. They're not UK specific. In fact, if you look at the investments in the UK for the infrastructure, green infrastructure, solar, it's tied to global funds, players that are active in multiple markets. Energy companies, we've got EDF, Iberdrola, Scottish Power, and so on, Lightsource, BP, and then you've got all the fund infrastructure funds that are global or are basically heavily weighted within Europe. So this and every single one of those entities is now net zero driven in a serious way. It's no longer, just something that you put down as a kind of nicety within a glossy brochure. People are going to lose their jobs if big companies they don't hit that. So it is, this whole net zero thing is just critical. I keep coming back to when I speak about this, that really that solar is only where you get there quickly and you get there on your own property, and you can turn things around, within 12 months and have 24 months and have huge amounts of generation. You can't do that with anything else. If you're looking at putting generation on rooftops, if you're a Morrison's, how do you quickly get numbers stacking up in your favor in 24 months? The only thing you can do, aside from buying green energy, a green energy deal from someone coming through a contract, for electricity, which is not being green. It's the only way of doing it on your own property building. It's only solar. That's how you do it. So I think that's why the kind of global drivers, the net zero, influencing UK, it's influencing the investments, and it's the stakes are just so high now on it.
Yeah.
And it just something seems to happen every few months that puts it even higher. COP26 did it, Ukraine did it, and now you've got the temperature fluctuations this summer have done it. It's just a never-ending sequence of things that just put the stakes up even higher.
Yeah, the investors, it's just the growing number of people I'm speaking to about our market research, to be honest. So look, very soon, the UK sector is going to be meeting up in London in just a couple of weeks for the first UK Solar Summit event. Why is this event important today?
Yeah, so this is in 2 weeks. Well, it's on the 14th, 15th September in London. It's the links there on the page. I think that the kind of idea of having a 2-day summit, and summit is very much there as opposed to a conference and an event. I really just see it as a summit defining this brand new role that solar has within the UK out to 2030. Who's building what, where, how's it going to happen, what are the challenges to go from this deployment level now to 40 to 50 gigawatts total by 2030. How is that actually going to happen? Not, what will people like to see? Talk about, from people that are not necessarily going to be part of that, but would like to be part of it. Really looking at how this happened, hearing people, go up on stage and say, this is how we, Scottish Power is going to significantly increase our contribution from own solar farms beside our wind capacity in the UK, and it's happening now. So it's the kind of backdrop has become even more essential to have something where it almost sets out common opportunities and challenges, and because you bring in all the current stuff we spoke about earlier with land and food, land for food or energy production, the role of solar within CFDs, NSIPs, and so on. And it just, I kind of thought initially it would be a great idea because it would be interesting and I think everyone would enjoy it. And now I'm thinking it's actually just, it's really, really essential that kind of dialogue happens that is not biased. It's not just proposing solar as the solution, but looking at how solar does that within, the public perception, the energy requirements, kind of challenges on land and rooftops and so on. So I think important from a number of different factors, but from a timing standpoint, my goodness, we couldn't have chosen a better moment.
Yeah, and returning to the actual topic of the podcast itself, the kind of headline data, with the record levels of solar farms that are being planned in 2022, it seems, really significant. I mean, without giving away too much, what numbers can you put on this, and can you explain why 2022 is such a pivotal year when thinking about solar farm deployment through to 2030?
Yeah, okay, so here's kind of numbers, some kind of quick update on a few sites that we're expecting to have decisions made on planning in the last couple of weeks. Basically 3.97 gigawatts approved this year, so literally 4 gigawatts of solar farm
Like 40% of what we've got.
has been approved in the first 8 months of this year, way beyond any period before in the UK solar industry.
Wow.
And that's after 8 months. So comfortably, 2022 will probably see 4.5 gigawatts of new solar capacity approved that could be built at some point going forward. There are NSIP sites, within that. There's Scottish Welsh government sites within that. There's a lot of the 50 gigawatt sites. So just a kind of record number of capacity. Actually, in previous years, there's been a lot more sites, but they've been much smaller. And then last year, there was 3.2 gigawatts approved in 12 months. Again, it's about, this 70%, as of what goes into planning is being approved, which is a very, very high number. So I think that it's kind of building up this pipeline of not just stuff that's speculative, but the vast majority of that is going to be built over the next 5 years. And then, of course, there's an additional, site capacity, number of sites that easily adds. That's just a fraction of what's being proposed at the moment. So I think that probably is so far that you've got you could spin that around in a number of ways. Record approval rate for solar as an ongoing energy solution option for UK seen in 2022. And I actually think what is going to get built between 2023 and 2025, we're actually seeing the whole basis for that at the moment. That's the big takeaway. So like 4 at the moment and an additional amount, and that's going to be stuff that will start feeding into the grid, over the next 2 or 3 years.
Incredible. So I guess, everybody, that's a great reason to come and join us at the UK Solar Summit, 14th and 15th of September in the city in London. I'd certainly be welcome, any conversations about our market research and how we can help you. And Finlay, thank you very much for sharing your insight and letting us know what's happening.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.